Mike Brey announces he's going to retire at the end of the year. My read on it, Tate, when I first saw it, was that this is not this felt more like a fire, like a forced firing. That then Mike Brey said, "You know what? That's not the worst thing in the world." You know what I
Right.
mean? Like I don't think this is. I don't think Mike Brey woke up one morning and said, "I think I'm ready to retire." I think Jack Swarbrick went to him and said, "Mike, are we sure?
Mm.
Like this is not it, Mike. This is like he's doing to Mike Brey what Syracuse fans have been trying to do to Jim Boeheim for years and years and years." And he said, "We kind of suck now, Mike. Is are we sure your heart's even in this? Yada yada yada." And then Mike Brey was like, "Great point, Jack. I don't think it is. I think I'm ready."
Right. It's
That's
been
kind of how I feel like it went down.
23 years. And, in his most recent press conference after the Florida State game, Mike Brey goes in. He says, our leaders on this team, they're accountable for themselves. They take ownership of themselves. But I've done a horrible job. It's
Mhm.
my fault. It was
Mhm.
the greatest Fall Guy speech I've heard in a while. But as I was hearing it, I said, that's a man that has come to terms with the fact that it's been 23 great years. What a ride. What a great ride with the Irish. But get me out of here. This is an Irish exit. I want to leave on top. And then I want to maybe move on and find something else. Because I think Mike Brey, I don't know if he's done yet, but I think the tenure at Notre Dame, this is the perfect time to let it go. And don't get fired. You know what I mean? Go out on top. You're the winningest coach in Notre
And
Dame
by,
history.
and by out on top, we mean above
Right.
only Louisville in
One
the
one win in the ACC.
ACC.
One win in the ACC.
We made almost last
But
in the
also
ACC,
Virginia
but
Tech only has one win in the
that's
ACC.
true.
And they're ahead of Clemson in the net. So make that make sense. Make that make sense. I don't blame Mike Brey, and I feel like it's the right time.
Tyler, your thoughts, the moment you see the news that Mike Bray's retiring, what was your initial thought? Like good, bad, indifferent?
Well, I wasn't too surprised based on how
Yeah.
the season's been going so far, but it's sad. I mean, I'm 26. He's been the coach for 23 years. So all memories I
Wow.
have of Notre Dame basketball, he's been the head guy leading the way. And there's been some really, really fun times during that stretch. Like I've said before, you guys always say I'm a Mike Brey hater. That's far from the truth.
Far from it.
Far from it.
I was a student during both Elite Eight runs, and it was awesome, man. And watching him on the sidelines, like his energy is infectious, and it's been awesome to run. It's been an awesome run, but it's probably time, especially after how this season has gone so far.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there were exactly sky high expectations for Notre Dame this season, but still, in spite of that,
9 and
I think
10.
of the meme that
1 and 7 in ACC play.
our expectations were low,
But my God.
but my God, how did we get here? Yeah, Mike Brey, as you said at the top, Tate, is for him to be the head coach of Notre Dame, and for him to have such strong ties to Duke and still be one of the most likable. I can't think of two institutions in college sports that are just like hate factories,
Mm.
like Notre Dame and Duke, right?
Right.
I mean, is that not the right way to describe? And this man has
If you went on Twitter and you saw someone's bio and they were like Notre
Notre
Dame
Dame
football,
football,
Duke
Duke
basketball,
basketball,
you're like,
yeah.
this might be the worst person in America.
Yeah,
And it
stinks.
turns out it's Mike
And it's Dick
Brey.
Vitale.
Potential
That man-
coaching candidate.
That man is Dick Vitale. Yeah.
Dickie V back.
So for him to have his professional, like, cause yeah, if you really follow college basketball, you know that he was a coach at Delaware. I think most people know him as like the guy cause they know him as the Notre Dame coach, obviously. But then you think about like where did he come before that? I feel like he does more, or maybe it just gets more publicized that he'll do more stuff where he talks about Coach K or like his time at Duke or
Right.
like remind people he was on the bench for some of those teams. To where like those are the associations are Duke and Notre Dame, and for that to be like the two brands that this man has worn for 30 years of his life, and still be one of the top 5 most likable guys in the sport is
Mhm.
insane, and it just speaks to how awesome he is. It makes you wonder like if he would have coached at Delaware his whole career, how likable he would have been.
I mean, and he got the Fighting Hens to a couple NCAA tournaments. He's a good coach. He came
I
from DeMatha, right, with Morgan Wooten. And if you're in that tree of coaches and players, you're coming from a great spot. And I mean, let's be honest. The reason why he went to Duke and the reason why he took that job is because Coach K was like, "I want the DeMatha recruits."
Yeah.
So he basically used Mike Brey, and then Mike Brey's such a good guy. He's like, I still will give credit to Coach
I
K.
grew up in Indiana as a non-Catholic, which is to say
Mm.
I hated Notre Dame. It's split down the line. If you're a Catholic kid in Indiana, you love Notre Dame. If you're
Right.
not, you're like, I hate you're either IU or Purdue, pretty much.
Mhm.
And I hated everything about Notre Dame. I hated the elitism that Notre Dame people had. I hated that they were stuck in the past celebrating the 80s, whereas I was more of an Indiana Hoosiers fan, Tate, and the Hoosiers definitely did not do that. Whereas Notre Dame was like, we won all these titles in the '80s. I was like, that's disgusting. Who cares?
But also, look at our banners.
Go Hoosiers! Look at those. No, I really did. Like I think I hated Notre Dame before I ever even knew what like college sports hatred was. Um, and then Mike Brey's hired as the head basketball coach at Notre Dame, and a guy by the name of Chris Thomas, who was Mr. Basketball in the state of Indiana in 2001, played at Pike High School in Indianapolis. He commits to Notre Dame in 2001, and this is right on the heels of Bob Knight getting fired. And that's not to say that like every single kid that was Mr. Basketball in Indiana was going to play for the Hoosiers, but that's how my brain took it. Was like if you're the guys who like my understanding, and it was obviously like just brainwashing by my father, but like my understanding was all the best guys, if you're Mr. Basketball in Indiana and you are of a certain level, you go play for Bob Knight. And the guys who didn't, I always thought just like weren't good enough. It was like, yeah, they won Mr. Basketball.
Or
but,
there
like,
was
he
something.
wasn't-
There was always something.
Yeah.
Some reason why.
Yeah, or like there's some, yeah.
Why
or-
is John Wall not playing in
Right.
North Carolina?
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Right. It's too close. The reason the reason the Mr. Basketballs didn't want to go to Indiana is because they wanted to stay close
Yeah,
to home.
Right.
But that's too close. So anyway, Chris Thomas in 2001, I remember watching Chris Thomas because I was 14 when Chris Thomas graduated high school, and I was super into Indiana high school basketball, and he was an absolute legend in Indianapolis. And I remember, like Jason Gardner's a good example. Jason Gardner's from Indy. He commits to Arizona. Same sort of thinking, like, what the hell's wrong with this guy? Like, what's going on? But I started watching Arizona basketball because of Jason Gardner. And I was like, I'm going to follow these Indiana guys wherever they go. He goes to Arizona, start watching him. Chris Thomas was the confusing one, though, because Jason Gardner was coming on the heels of Arizona winning the 97 title.
Right.
And Lute Olson's got like a thing going out there. And I was like, I kind of get it. Like, Knight's on the tail end of his career, and Jason Gardner wanted to take a big swing and go to Arizona. That makes sense to me. When Chris Thomas committed to Mike Brey in 2001, I remember being just so confused as to how and why this could happen. Like, what the hell was this man thinking? I was absolutely baffled. But what I did do after that, Tate, is I started watching a lot of Notre Dame basketball. And that was my long-winded way of saying that was my introduction point to Mike Brey. That was also my introduction point to not hating Notre Dame as a brand, because I started watching Chris Thomas, and they never were. I'm trying to remember. I think they had like one good team in his 4 years, if I remember right. Bray's first year was Troy Murphy's last year, but then Chris Thomas came after that. But I remembered like they had like one good year, but oh my God, they were so fun. And like Chris
Right.
Thomas was so fun. And I was like, this is actually, I can't hate this team. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. And Luke Herringody was my age. Luke Zeller was Mr. Basketball. He ended up going to Notre Dame. Then Luke Herringody committed. They had some fun teams. Anyway, Notre Dame, like very quickly, everything I thought I knew about like what Notre Dame represents as an institution, Mike Brey stepped in and said, we probably still represent those things, but we're going to have fun doing it. You know, like we don't take ourselves super seriously. And I don't know. It's as I look back on it, that's a huge upset to me, because I thought as a child I was just going to hate Notre Dame my whole life, but Mike Brey made me not hate them.
Yeah, Mike Brey is the definition of you give him lemons, he made lemonade.
Yeah.
And he comes on the heels of Matt Doherty, who was National Coach of the Year, but also, as we know, a very
That's right. I
aggressive
forgot about that.
guy. You know what I mean? Not a very likable, affable dude at any level, you know, for the most part. So he comes in for that. You lose a National Coach of the Year. He goes to North Carolina. People are like, I'm not sure about this guy. We'll see. And then he becomes beloved, and he wins. It felt like the entire time, even when they were in the Big East, like Notre Dame's going to win 20 games.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of was the standard, and he's going to be likable. He's going to have a guy like Luke Herringody. When it was, I remember the Maui Invitational, it was Herringody versus Hansbrough, and it was this whole showdown, and Notre Dame was a lot of fun. And then even when Ben Hansbrough went to Notre Dame, you know, because I had watched Tyler. I was obviously a fan of Tyler. Then his brother's at Notre Dame. I'm like, okay, now I'm weirdly pulling for a Duke guy, you know, at Notre Dame. What is happening?
Mhm.
Like Mike Brey had so many of those check yourself moments.
Mm-hmm.
He was the Big East Coach of the Year 3 times, I believe. He comes to the ACC, new conference. You're saying, get this guy out of here. He's an outsider. All of a sudden, he's the most likable ACC coach out of nowhere. It's like every single time he got dealt a bad hand, Mike Brey delivered a good situation or a good outcome. And then right now, obviously, this class that's been there for 6 years, it feels like 10 years, it hasn't worked out, right? Every single year, you're like, well, maybe this is the year that it clicks. And that's why I feel a little bit bad for him, because I felt like he was waiting for that last good ride, that last good run, and then it would be over.
Yeah.
And he's not going to get that.
Yeah.
Maybe he does in the ACC tournament.
Yeah.
But in general, that's the only thing I don't like about the Mike Brey finale. Because every other time it seemed to work out. Even with Under Armour. you're like, Under Armour is a bad draw, right? You don't
Yeah.
want to be sponsored by Under Armour in a Nike Adidas arms race. But Mike Brey said, I love Under Armour. In fact, I'll go down to Baltimore all the time to Under Armour.
Notre Dame, I'm looking at the schedule. Notre Dame plays Clemson the last game of the year, the
Mm.
regular season, at Clemson. What if that's the Mike Brey gets carried off the court on like Clemson goes into that game tied for the ACC on the regular season standings. If they
Right.
win, they clinch share of the title, and the place is buzzing, and Notre Dame pulls off the upset to finish what's it, their third win in the ACC, say, and they just throw Mike Brey on their shoulders and dump Gatorade on him and celebrate in Clemson like they I don't know, makes sense to me.
He
That's
deserves
that's
it.
as close as you're gonna get to like a walk off,
Right.
Mike Brey moment that we want.
Kind of like Albert Pujols, I just
Yeah,
wanted,
yeah,
I wanted to
right.
get back in the batter's box one more time, and maybe he hits a home run, right? That's
Yeah.
all we need. And he's top 7 in wins in current coaches that are active. When you look at the list, and I was saying this to you before we even started recording, in college basketball, as we're losing these legends and these legendary coaches who have the autonomy to be around for 23 years, we don't live in that kind of world anymore. I'm not sure that Notre Dame will ever have a coach be there for 23 seasons with how volatile things are and how quickly things can, flip on its head for these coaches. So to lose Mike Brey, who's only behind the Bill Selfs, Randy Bennett's, Mark Few, Tom Izzo, Jim Boeheim, you're losing a legend in the coaching ranks too. And that's always sad because he's such a good character.
Tyler, how do you think it went down? Do you think my assessment is correct? Do you think Mike Brey asked for this? Who do you think said the words retirement first? Like the Notre Dame side, the administration side, one of the players, one of the assistant coaches, or do you think it was Brey himself? It's like, I'm too old for this shit.
I think it was a mutual breakup.
Yeah.
I would say that whoever probably said first, it was probably Jack Swarbrick. He was probably like, all right, what's next here?
Yeah.
How do we rebound from this pretty horrific season? Because I think that's the most surprising part about this team is they're so bad, but they're so experienced. And it goes against everything that Mike Brey has done in his career because usually like he's great at player development. They'd get old, like thinking Tib Abramitis was a great story like that. Got a lot better as his time went on. That just did not happen this year, to say the least. So now you look at the construction of the roster looking forward, and it's not great, which then makes the job a little bit less appealing to future coaches. But I think there was probably a point there where they realized they had to sever ties or move in a different direction going forward.
Yeah, Swarbrick was like, Mike, we're not moving on. I just want to know what your plan is to fix this because it's going to be a lot of hard work to get it back. And Mike was like, "Is hard work?
Yeah,
I don't want hard work."
He said, "I think I'm just gonna."
It's like you're going to do the hard work, right?
Get
Mike
out
was
of
like,
here.
"I'm not."
Yeah.
Great
Yeah.
coach, not great
That'd be-
recruiter, and it's kind of important in the whole coaching thing now.
He had the Magic Johnson. I'm not going to be here.
Do we think he's done? He's done, right?
I think he'd be great
like,
on
what
TV.
What does he do next?
He'd be awesome on TV.
I think he's awesome on TV. I think if he wants to just like go open like a jet ski rental place on a beach somewhere,
Right.
that makes sense to me too.
Hey there, thanks for watching Titus and Tate. For the full friend of the program experience, subscribe right below and come join us for all things college basketball. The action is heating up. Come join Titus and Tate.